Hey, everybody, welcome to Keep the Change. I am so glad you're here. You know that every week we get together, and this is one of my favorite times of the week because I get to hang out with people maybe that I've known. I've had my family in here. I've got to hang out with folks that I don't know and get really deep with them and find out what their stories are. And I've gotten to renew friendships with folks that I haven't talked to in a while. And that's really what today is all about. Chris Kirkpatrick and I met at Cornerstone Church. Oh my gosh, it's probably been 3 or 4 years now. And I always love Chris's energy, his entrepreneurship, his heart for helping people. He's a person of faith. He's got an incredibly beautiful family. And you're going to hear all about that today. Chris is a life coach. He's got a number of different businesses. He's got this incredible entrepreneurial spirit. He's got a company called LIFE180. He's got a podcast. He's a money coach. And you're going to hear all about that today. But more than anything else, I want you to hear the spirit of the man from where he was to where he is and the story of going from the pit to peace, because it's prevalent and it's powerful. And what you need to know as you listen to this today is that any of us can get from there to here. And that's the hope that Chris Kirkpatrick brings. And brother, I want to thank you. You and I were having a little pre-set, whatever you call it, in the podcast world. And I just talked about, man, I haven't talked to you in a while. I call you and you pick up the phone on 2 rings, and I'm emotional about it because you were right there. And we've had some incredible discussions at our homes. And we have... What I've seen in the last 24 hours with us getting together like this is God's work in place. And so I want to welcome you, Chris Kirkpatrick. Let it go, brother. Welcome to the show. Tell us about you and where you've been and where you are.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, I guess thanks for having me. I always enjoy conversations with you. So when you kind of asked me last night to hop on, or yesterday to hop on this podcast with you, I was like, man, I get to sit down with Bart and just talk for 40 minutes. I'm in. Let's go. This is gonna be fun. Let's have some fun. So I have a weird life. I feel like I've lived like 15 lives in a way. I'm 42 years old. I grew up in Vermont, kind of came from nothing. I mean, I had a lot of love, so I'm blessed from that perspective. My parents were amazing, from that perspective, which I guess is more than one deserves in a lot of ways. But, I didn't grow up with a lot of education around money or anything of that nature. Kind of grew up in a double wide trailer, and didn't really have any push to go to college or whatever. I became a very competitive athlete in high school. That carried over into my 20s. I was competing for the Olympics for a period of time.
Stop.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hate to do that. That's kind of how I roll.
Yeah.
Talk about that. You were in the Olympics. Tell me, what was the sport? I know what it is, but tell them a little bit.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, it's funny. I was a baseball player, and then I got to high school for the first day of high school, and the big track coach comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, are you Chris Kirkpatrick?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You coming out for the track team?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a baseball player." And he's like, "Well, your dad's Bill, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, your dad holds like all the javelin records, right?" And I'm like, "You got the wrong guy. Like, if my dad held those records, I would know it." And this just kind of gives you an idea of like the household I grew up in, right? So I go home, first day of high school, freshman year, and my dad's like, "How was school?" He and not right away. He got home at like 6:00 that night, from work, because he worked long hours. He was a truck driver. And he gets home and he's like, "How was school?" And I'm like, "It was great, except for this kooky track coach came up and tried to tell me it was some like track superstar or whatever." He goes, like, holding all these javelin records or whatever. He goes, "I still got those things?" And I'm like, okay. And so I decided to start trying to throw the javelin, and it went really well. I mean, I started getting my full first scholarship offers sophomore year of high school, which was crazy. I realized I could throw pretty far. I ended up setting the high school national record. At one point in time, I was ranked number 2 in the country throwing the javelin. I spent my 20s competing to try to get into the Olympics. got close 2 times, got injured every single time. And I had 6 reconstructive surgeries. I spent about 5 years in my 20s in physical rehab from surgery reconstruction. And so my wife, was a saint, because I've been with my wife, transitioning to the next story. I've been with my wife since I was 22. Wow. Right. So she was there for a lot of the journey in my 20s. In fact, she was kind of somebody who inspired me to, and kind of pushed me to keep going and do it. And, at the end of it, it was just, it's hard when you go through that kind of emotional downswing every time you get so close to something. And then, I literally was going to the Olympic trials. It was the Olympic trials were going to be in June at the Home Depot Center. And I remember about being ready to qualify, and then bang, I tear my groin when I was 28 years old. And it was the last time, it was my last shot, right? It's like your body can only take so much for so long, and it's a pretty aggressive sport on your body. And I remember I tore my groin, I hit the track. I just felt like a sack of potatoes. And, after trying for literally a decade, realizing that the dream was over, that was tough, and it kind of all, you start to question, I went through a little bit of a depression at that point in time. I went, it put strain on, at that point in time, my wife and I got married when we were 26. And so it put strain on the marriage. It put strain on just my emotional, the letdown of it. And, obviously not obviously, I guess, but I became pretty depressed. Probably the only time in my life I really actually have gone through a depression, and because I like to think I'm pretty resilient, right? But that part really got me. And it impacted my businesses. It impacted, because I all the while I was running businesses and doing other things while I was training, because it's just the way I kind of operate. But it had a really negative impact on everything I was doing in life. And things started falling apart around me. And and mind you, 2008, what was happening in the world? That I was 28. That was it. 2008. We were going through having our house foreclosed on in Maricopa, Arizona. I got injured. My businesses were failing. My wife got laid off. It was just this train wreck. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah. So let me, I've got so many questions for you, brother. So let's go back to the javelin days, right?
Yeah.
So let's go back. You walk on that field and that coach says, are you, what's your dad's name?
Bill
Kirkpatrick's kid?
Yep.
Wait a minute. Now, you didn't know any of this. Your dad never came off the truck and said, let me tell you what I did, sunshine.
No.
He never did that.
No.
And it was his humble authority. He never said anything, which is it gives me chills. And yet he was a legend. And from that, you had always played baseball. What was it that made you decide that, you know what, I'm going to do this javelin thing? It's because, hey, I want to live in my dad along. I want to go alongside Pops. What was it that made you think I'm going to do this? Or what? Why didn't you just say, no, I'm going to stay with baseball? Because that was quite the shift.
Yeah, huge. Well, so initially I didn't give up baseball. I did both. I got the track coach and the baseball coach to come to an agreement and allow me to do both sports my freshman year.
So wait, you're a negotiator. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, something like that. It started young, I guess. But I didn't have to stop playing baseball. That was the only way I was going to make a run at trying track and field and doing the javelin. But so I did it. And then freshman year, I set the Vermont State freshman record. I actually set the New England freshman record. And so it just kind of was oh, hey, I'm pretty good at this. Right. And then sophomore year, I remember my grades were not very good. Right. And so I remember getting my first scholarship offer sophomore year from Columbia. Ooh, and I was so my track coach hands me this offer, right? Because my track coach was he was a former Ohio State University track coach who retired and just, yeah.
OHIO.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Go Bucks.
Exactly. So he's a former Ohio State coach and he retired to Vermont to be with family. And then he was he couldn't stay away from it. So he took a side job as a hall monitor. And it would talk about blessings in life, man. This guy coming into my life as a teenager My parents didn't have much money. My grandfather was pretty successful, but my parents worked their butt off and were always gone. I was like a latchkey kid, growing up. And, having him there, when he walks in and hands me this scholarship offer, and I didn't even know what it was. It was just a letter from Columbia. So he's standing there and I'm opening it, and it was just delivered to the school. That's how things worked back then. And, I open it up and I remember looking at it being like, Dell, I got a full ride offer. And that doesn't happen for track and field. Like, they have their limited offers, and it was even worse back then, and like whatever. And I was just like so excited. And he's just like, you think you're getting into Columbia with those grades? And I'm just like, he's like, he can give you an offer, but you got to qualify to get in, like whatever, according to the NCAA registrar. And it was just, it was a awakening. And he was really, really just like this guiding mentor for me. And he traveled with me. I mean, he took time out of his life and really showed me what it was like to serve in high school. Like I had amazing parents. Like I said, they did what they could, but they worked their butt off. They couldn't afford me. Like when I started qualifying for national track meets, when I started qualifying for the junior national team and traveling all over the country and the continent and like North and South America, my parents couldn't take time off from work. They couldn't do anything to help. And they did what they could financially, but my grandfather ended up subsidizing a lot of it because he was successful. But he was also very sick. My grandfather had multiple myeloma, and it just ate him alive. He ended up dying in 1998. And so he was 2 years away from, passing at that point in time, and he was still very sick. And so, but he was financing whenever I qualified for something, but I still couldn't have gone because I needed somebody to go. And Dell literally gave up his life to go with me everywhere. It was
it's interesting. What's interesting is not to cut somebody off. That's what's interesting. But hey, it's real. It's life. We're hanging out, right? We're having a cup of coffee. Literally. So I want to hear about Dell, man. I mean, there's so many. Man, it's an emotional story, bro.
Yeah. It's got me tearing up. I haven't
talk about real
terms.
I mean, my son and I went to dinner last night with his bride, and we were just talking about, they're talking about having kids, and they're talking about, they've only been married a year, and it's expensive in California, and it's hard it's a challenge to do that. And I don't want to get into his personal nature on this podcast, but he's got such a great heart. They're just like every other human being on the planet. How do we do this? We've got a marriage. When do kids come? Do they come? And what do we get a home? Do we not? All those things, life things, right?
Yeah.
So then we talk about a guy like Dell, and the reason I brought up my son is because what I did when I was young is make the decision, because I could, Chris, to make sure all my kids could play sports. So I had 4 kids in hockey all over the country.
Awesome.
So I would travel with some of them. Their mother would travel with some of them, and then we'd go into separate locations. And I made the decision. It wasn't good for my career, absolutely not. But I made the decision that that's what I was going to do. And I wasn't smart enough at that time to be an entrepreneur or have multiple businesses like you. But I just want to take it back to Dell. Those memories that you talk about, Dell, right? Or even my kids will say, Dad, you guys made that happen for us, right? As your kids will do the same for you. Being a mentor for somebody, being that person that when you and I hit on a podcast and I stopped you and took you back in that time. And I say, and Dell was the one that came to mind. Your parents, your loving parents, but Dell. Wow, what a legacy to leave. That we can have a young man like you say, that guy had a huge part, not only my parents, but that guy who was brought into our life had a huge part in who I am today because of his heart for serving a young man with no That he didn't want anything in return. He just wanted
Nothing
to
to gain. Nothing to gain.
And you know what's so interesting? Every time I do a podcast, if I really look deep, I always ask people, who's that one person? And some guys, frankly, can't think of one. They can think of the people they didn't want to be like, which I find fascinating. But not all of them can think about who they did want to be like or who really left an impact. When you and I can leave that kind of an impact, dude, with all the businesses you have, the beautiful family you have, all that, leaving the Dell impact, isn't that really what this is all about, man?
You know, it's
I
awesome.
heard that.
And this is why I love, guys. This is why I love talking to Bart. Like, I've never put this together before in all my conversations. Like,
touches me.
It's huge. Like, and if you get to know me and like whatever, I that's all I really live for, is just trying to serve people and help people
and your family.
And exactly. And my wife was always like, you know, when we're talking alone, she's always like, I don't understand where you get this like need to just help people from, like, the level that you do, you know. And it's like,
it's a Dell factor.
I don't either. And it's interesting, like I can't tell you. I mean, there's so many stories that like just Dell has in my life. Like, I remember I had to go to Southern Illinois University to compete in the junior nationals when I was 16 years old, and it was my first big meet. And I had to go, and my parents couldn't go. And like, there was no chance I was going to go. Dell just had knee replacement surgery. Like, was stuck. His leg was straight and stiff. And back then, knee replacement surgeries were nasty. I mean, they were hard surgeries. And he literally was like, whatever, you need to drive. I was 16. I had to have an adult in the car to drive. I couldn't just go on my own. I couldn't get a hotel. He literally sat in the back of the car and sprawled his leg across and was like, I'll go with you.
Boom.
Not a question.
I want to be like Dell. You know, I think you should create a Dell Award.
Oh,
right?
Good call.
Yeah. Once a year Dell Award for those people that show that mentorship for somebody else, a man or a woman that lifts somebody else up and changes their lives.
And it's awesome because I still talk to Dell to this day. I mean, he was 60 something. He's in his mid 80s now, but he still is like whippersnappery as ever. You know? he's a whip, man. And
that's got to be a Vermont phrase. Whippersnappery. Exactly. I've never heard that before.
He's back in Ohio now, but every time I make it through that way, I stop in and see him every couple of years, and he's like family, man.
Well, you got such a great story, so I don't want to stop there. But what I heard was a young man who just thought, hey, we'll give this thing a shot. We'll keep playing baseball. You did the javelin to a level of excellence that only the king of the universe knew how good you could be. You had incredible gifts, obviously, I mean, from your DNA, and you had incredible mentors, and yet you had some incredible adversities through this. And here you are, you said you were building businesses while you were going through this. You obviously moved from Vermont to Arizona, but here you are going through this. What were the lessons as you sit here now? I don't want to fast forward too much to now, but what are the lessons that you learned about those javelin days that really have affected who you are today, besides the Dell lesson, because I see Dell in you, but I mean, in terms of you're almost there and whoop, your arm falls off.
Dude. Oh my gosh. That's a story of my life. You know, it's, I guess the thing that I've learned is, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me and my wife and our family and just our journey. And I've been on a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and, you know, they use the phrase, the entrepreneurial roller coaster, for a reason, right? Like, it's full of highs and lows, right? And when you're going down to the lows, it goes fast, right? And it feels like you're out of control, and you don't know what's going to happen at the bottom, kind of deal. And it's interesting because, like, I mean, you're an entrepreneur, and like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are. And have you ever had the feeling when you're doing something and you're like, oh my gosh, like all these things in life have led me to this moment? Right. Like, and
100%.
And then you get there and you're like, thank God, like everything has led me to this place. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be it. Like, this is the thing. And like, you get jacked up and you're excited and you're like, praise God. And like, this is everything I've ever, like, I've been built up to this moment, and then boom, and it crashes. And you're like, what the heck? You know, like, what do I do now? Like everything is, and I guess what I've learned is, how do I say this? Like I've had so many ups and downs, like literally, like we don't have time for them, right? Like I've had so many ups and downs over between the time of 18 and 34, right? Especially, and I've had ups and downs since then, but there was a lot of like really extreme ups and downs in that period of time. And one of the things that I learned is just to realize that no matter where I am, my current circumstance has nothing to do with my future, you know? And whether I'm feeling really good about today or whether I'm feeling really down about today, I believe, and I've literally internalized this, and it drives me. And I know it's an easy catchphrase, but I truly believe God wants more for me than I could ever imagine if I just stay faithful and stay true and do my part. And so I've just kind of internalized at this point in time, like if you truly believe that, then what do you ever have to be afraid of? What do you ever have to be scared of or fearful of, or what do you have to have anxiety about or whatever? And so for me, I just try to stay present. I try to stay focused on people. I don't try to stay like, and this is where, as an entrepreneur, this is where I'm a really horrible entrepreneur, by the way. I'm not results oriented. I'm very activity oriented, and I'm very people focused, right? Like I don't, sometimes it costs me a lot of money, because I don't really focus on like, how much money am I going to make this year? Like, how do I monetize this in this way? Like we all have to do that to a certain extent. I mean, we got to survive. We got to, create profitable businesses and serve people. But I just kind of come from the mindset of like money follows value, right? Like, so, and I truly believe that. And so like, the only thing I've been trying to focus on is like, am I on a path that God wants me on? Am I staying true to myself and my family and the life that I want to live and the life that my wife and I have agreed to try to create together? And can I go out and create enough value in the market to get the monetary return that I'm worth? And if I can, then I'll get it. And if I'm not, money is just a scoreboard, and that's kind of how I look at it. I don't look at it as something I'm like doing, or it's something I'm after. I just look at it as like, it's a result, right? Like it, and I just try to not be too worried about like, what am I doing right now? Because like, I could even say right now, man, I tell you what, you called me like the last time we spoke, right? I mean, we were talking pre-COVID, and then COVID happens, and, all this stuff, and life for me at the beginning of COVID got really hard, as it did for, I'm sure, a lot of people, you know what I mean? And I had a great marketing business, and it literally just got wiped out overnight, like literally overnight. And I remember just looking at my wife and being like, what do I do now? Right. Like, and so, but it got me back into the financial space in a way, right? That I've always felt a calling towards, but I never would have taken the step back into it had it not been for that. Right. And now things are as great as I could ever imagine. Like they're better right at this very moment than they've probably ever been. Right. And so even now though, I'm just like, it is what it is. Like, I don't know what God wants for the future. It's going to be what he's going to be. I'm going to show up every single day and try to serve people and help and show up as the best version of myself as I can possibly be today. And maybe I'm going to drop the ball today, and it might not be as good some days as others, but I'm going to wake up and pray and do the best I can and see how it goes.
There's such a piece of that, bro. I think that I really want whoever's listening to hear this. Everyone's had adversity, right? So whether it's you're on the way to the Olympics and you got your groin torn and that was the end of your career at 28, or you got to COVID times and things fell apart. But what I want you to hear about my brother Chris, for one thing, let's not discount this. We talked about the Dell factor, and I want to thank Dell. I hope he listens, because I want to thank him for setting the stage for this. But we talked about that giving unconditionally, giving from the heart, giving with nothing in return. Did you hear what you said? You said, my business is not about results. It's about activities. It's about the people. It's about growing the people. The results will come. So that influence that that man had on you when you were a young man, the influence your parents had in terms of work hard, go for it, and love, all those things that you are, as a father, as a husband, as a husband who supports his wife, and when she was on stage, and I'm sure that was a tricky moment because and humbling in itself, but as a person of humility that is about building other people up. That's what I keep hearing you say. And through all the adversity, dude, when I met you, you and I sat in your beautiful home in Ocotillo. I love your home. It was raining out, and you were talking about having a business and all of a sudden having it fall apart and you going and drive an Uber. Within months, you had a huge contract. And then you talked about in your story here today, the adversity of things just fall apart and crash. But what I love about you and I respect about you and I appreciate about you is that, dude, you might look at your wife and say, what are we going to do? You might get down for a day, as we all do, but you don't hang there, dude. You're saying, okay, what are we going to, you don't say, oh, shoot, I can't do anything. You say, what are we going to do? And when that triggers Chris, you do something, right?
Well, I don't look, it's that old adage. It's like, I don't believe anything is happening to us. I believe it's happening for us. And I think, like, if you can really resonate with that, like, God is in control. Like, I don't know how to say this. Like, if I have one blessing, like, that I would count greater than any other blessing, is that I truly have internalized and believed that God is in control, and that he wants more for my life. And that when something like that happens, if that's the case, like, when all those things have happened, and Bart just explained a couple of them, like, they rocked our world financially. They created a lot of uncertainty. I had to drive. I went from making a couple $100,000 a year to having to drive Uber just to survive and pay bills, driving 100 hours a week for 6 months straight. Like, it was brutal, and it's, but even in that, like, I didn't worry about it. I never was upset, and the reason is because I just truly believed that it was happening for me, like, that I was just being redirected and that something would work out. And honestly, looking back at it now, it'd be really easy to, like, lose sight of it. And I did hit my breaking point, man. And this is the power of God. Like, I'll tell you, like, real quick, like, I remember after driving for 6 months and being faithful and being like truly just believing, I had my breakdown moment. I remember sitting in the car in the airport pickup line for Uber, having a screaming match with God, like, just freaking out, because just being like, man, I've been faithful. I've been true. I've been doing everything I can. You know how I show up in this world, God. Like, you know what I want to do. You know my heart. If I'm wrong, this isn't about my ego. This isn't about anything else. Just please, but I can't keep doing this. Like, 100 hours a week in a car, drive. Like, I just, like, I'll go shovel stalls if that's what it means, but I can't be, because for me, it wasn't even the work, and it was the time away from my family that was killing me. It was like, that part, like, I just couldn't do it. And I just had this screaming match. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Show me a sign, like, give me something. And literally, Bart, the very next day, I landed a multi-six-figure marketing deal from somebody that stepped into my Uber the first ride of the day the next day.
No, I got to stop you, but we got to talk about that, right? So just desperation. I hate this. God help me. But you didn't run away from God, right? You're a person of faith. You didn't run away. You didn't say, forget this. This God thing doesn't work. There was a couple words that really have stuck with me on this. And, I love this show because a lot of people bring God into it. Some don't. And it's okay. It's not what this show's about. It's just that. But it's really fascinating to hear successful people who have been broken, who are successful. There's that God component in there big time with like 100% of the people. But what I heard you say is from your heart, you always trusted, and you trusted, but you prayed, God, let me trust, right? You were faithful, and you prayed, God, let me be faithful. in your core place, you wanted to be those two things.
Yeah.
And that's why you said, okay, I hate this. Help me. I'll shovel horse poo. I don't care, but I want to be for the right reasons. I want to be home with my family. Show me the way. Dude, can I interject something here? Because this just seems so powerful, and we're having coffee. This is your story, not mine, and I always try to stay in my lane with that.
No, you're awesome, man. Just
dude,
go.
you got to hear this. You know, as an entrepreneur, I've like whoop whoop, and, you know, we don't need to go into all that, but I think you have to have a heart as an entrepreneur that's flexible, and you for one thing, you can't give up, and that's one thing I say to Mary. I will never.
Totally. You can't.
I'm not finishing that sentence on this podcast because I'm getting emotional. I won't give up. If there's one thing about me, I won't give up. But something happened yesterday, bro. So I had a client who I've known who's a wonderful guy, man of God, good person, who had said, yeah, I want to move ahead. And he pushed me off a couple times. You've had those. And you know that the darkness probably means here it comes. And then I call a couple times, he doesn't pick up, all that stuff that friends, I'm saying in air quotes, don't do. Unlike you, who picked up on the second ring, he finally, he didn't pick up, but he sent me an email. Hey, we're going to hold off, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of knew it was coming. The funny thing is it happened a couple of weeks ago with somebody else that I've known for 30 years. Now here's the deal though. I went, I knew it was coming. I was on the freeway yesterday and I got a flat tire in my rent-a-car. That's another story. So I pulled into Panera Bread and I just started having lunch, deciding what I was going to do next. And I happened to open up my email and there was an email from a guy that said, let's go. Now, my direction of my company nowadays is leadership, mastermind, coaching focused. That's all I'm doing. I'm training leaders to be salespeople, but I'm not training salespeople anymore. I'm training leaders how to be coaches, great men at home, great fathers, great husbands, just like Chris. I want them to train them to be Chris Kirkpatricks, right? That's what I want to do. That's my avatar. But I'm getting to this. I'm opening this up. There's this email from this guy who is, I won't get too many details, but I have interviewed him on this podcast. He runs one of the biggest businesses of its kind in the country, where he said the check's in the mail. We're starting with our mastermind group with my people. It's their Christmas present to them. I'm looking forward to see you next week. That's awesome. Here's what happens, Chris. Same story, bro. Yours is more dramatic, but God takes away, or maybe just puts aside what he didn't give us in the first place. And he gives. He gave you the guy in the back seat. Right. He gave me my friend who sent me that email and said, let's rock and roll. And by the way, I don't use friend lightly. Any of my clients are friends, right? Some of them pick up the phone faster, but we're told to love them all no matter what, right?
Totally.
And just love them through all their stuff. So back to the guy being in the back seat, because everybody needs to hear that through our adversity, flat tires, screaming at God, you trusted, you had faith, you never gave up on that. You did privately, but God knew that. Here's the thing about what I find fascinating about God is that no matter how much we don't always trust him, he always believes in us. He sees us so much deeper than we ever see ourselves. And when we get it, the guy in the back seat shows up. So tell us about that.
You know, it was interesting. Like it was, this guy named Ryan. It was just an interesting scenario. Like he ran a company that I never thought I'd be doing anything in that space, but it just, it was a challenge, and it was just one of those things where, I didn't have any expectations of anything, but it was this cool situation where he had to have a long ride. It was a 40-minute ride. And so it was him and his family, his wife, and his 3 kids got in the car and he sat in the front seat, and he was just kind of like this hipster guy, tattoos, flat brim hat, but he was sitting in, I mean, he literally I picked him up at like a $4 million house in downtown Phoenix, like at this, really sweet place. And And so I just asked him, like, hey, do you mind me asking, like, what do you do for a living, man?
What a
Like,
great
this
question.
is got a pretty sweet setup. And we started talking, and it was just like one of those things, like literally I said, it was the night before I was like having this shouting match with God. And literally I asked him this question, and then he goes, well, it's pretty obvious to me, you're not just an Uber driver. Like, so what do you do? And I'm like, and I was, dude, and a lot of people would try to hide it, you know? And I just felt this like call to be authentic and real. And I was like, I'm going to tell you, like, honestly, I run a marketing agency. You know, I had some contracts run up and some things fall through, and you know, I'm just driving Uber until the next gig. And he goes, like, what kind of marketing? And I was like, well, I do a lot of ClickFunnels stuff, a lot of Dream 100 stuff, like whatever. He's like the Dream 100. And he goes, I'm looking to implement that. Like literally, he goes, and I go, you don't know what the Dream 100 is. Are you kidding me? Like, nobody knows what that is. And he's like, no, I do. And he was telling me the books he was reading. And I'm like, so we started like literally on this ride. I gave him like a free kind of consulting session about it. And it was more, I guess, him looking back at it, it was more him like testing me to see what, like, you know, my proficiency, so to speak.
Wait, him?
Yeah,
or him.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's so it was interesting. He literally dropped his business card with me and asked me to text him, and I just so he'd have my number, and I did. And then literally the next morning, he's like, hey, can you come into my office this morning? And literally from within 48 hours, I went from screaming at God, questioning everything, to being exactly where I wanted to be.
Oof.
And like anybody that questions the realness of that, like I go to that moment for me.
Yeah.
Because that reshifted the direction of everything. Like I wouldn't be here now if that 48-hour window like hadn't happened, right? Like if that experience hadn't happened, or maybe I would be, it would be something else, like, you know, like whatever, but it's, you know, it's nuts to think about.
Yeah. So I've got to, as we kind of wrap up here, you know, you and I could go about another hour and a half, but I've got to ask you a couple questions. Again, I brought it up just a little bit, and I hope I'm not treading on it.
No, you're good. And dude, my life's an open book.
You know where I'm going. So your wife had you guys been married since you're 20. Your wife's had great success recently in the last couple of years, getting on stage, being noticed, and you were you and I weren't connecting at that point. So you were the ultimate supporter of her being and I know how good you are as a father. I know how much you love your kids. I know how much you love your wife. What was the greatest victory for you, seeing her have her success, but also the challenge with all that? And again, I could open up some doors here, but understand, we're doing this not because we're not, it's not about Chris right now. It's about somebody that needs to hear this, to support their spouse, to love them, but also understand, you know what, this is about me too. How did you navigate through that period of time, if you don't mind hitting on that just a shade?
Yeah. So just to kind of give everybody clarity on what he's talking about. So my wife won the Mrs. American competition. And so she was Mrs. American for, which is basically like the married version of Miss America or Miss USA. Right. And so she won that in 2021, spent a whole year, became a finalist at Mrs. World. And it was an interesting experience. I think the high of it had nothing to do with the notoriety or anything like that. It was all internally driven. You know, she had a goal of winning a national title, like, you know, and if you understand the pageant world, which you got to be in it to really understand it, by the way, like it's nuts. But if you understand that world, like it's harder to win a national title than it is to reach the Super Bowl, right? Like it's in that world. There's only like 5 national title holders in every level total, like every year, right? And so it's hard to do. And so for her to do that, it was a goal that she'd been after literally since she was 16 years old, you know. And so we're talking 24 years at that point in time for her to achieve that. And so, I mean, that was cool on its own, but really, like, you know, I mean, and you know this with our family, like it's all about our kids, and like the reason, I think one of the things that drives me and my wife to keep going to the level that we do has everything to do with, like, I look at where I came from and where we are now. And the goal is to inspire our kids to take it to the next level, and to show them that anything's possible if you just go after your dreams and you just stay to it and you just have faith and you just, keep pushing forward, keep moving forward. And so I was just super proud of her for not giving up, because, she deals with addiction, and she's in recovery, and, she deals with a lot of depression and mental stuff that goes along with that. And the joy of living a life of sobriety was her platform, because you have to have a platform when you're on there, right? Like, and so it's to know internally what she deals with, and to see her battle through that and overcome that, and achieve that goal, had nothing to do with the fact that, hey, I was married to Mrs. American. Like, don't get me wrong, that was great, but it's like, it really, like, I was just proud of her, right, for achieving a lifetime goal, something that she'd been after. Now, the downside of it was, oh man, this is going to be a long episode if we keep going. But like the downside of it is, once you get to the top, it's really hard when you get there and it's not what you thought it would be.
Yes.
Right.
Chris, isn't that true of everything?
Totally.
I mean, I'm not a wise sage to know if that is or not, but it certainly seems like, oh, this isn't what I thought. So maybe it was the journey or the lessons, and please don't stop, but I'm throwing this out because it's just coming to my mind. Those three questions: what I do right, what I learn, and what do I need to change from that experience, right?
Yeah.
But take us on there, because I want to hear this. We need to hear this.
Well, I tell you what, you need to have her on your podcast to talk about this too, because she'd share it. And she's, her perspective is I think impactful. And she and I have had dozens of hours of conversations around this, just because it was challenging for her, right? Like, so and the hard part is like when you get there and it's not what you thought it would be. And I think that happens in people's businesses. It happens in our lives. We expect that, when we achieve a certain level of success, or our business hits a certain level, or we have a certain income, or we reach a certain position, or do something, that life is just going to be different. And it's like, it's not the case no matter what. Like, it's never going to be. You are who you are. And it's like, I think, it's exactly what you said. It's about the journey. And, so she and I, in that process, we had to do a lot of praying, a lot of introspection, and just start to, because of the fact that she does deal with, the ups and downs and some depression and the swings that go along with that. We had to have a lot of conversations around the fact that, exactly what you said, like, babe, this is maybe it wasn't about your year as a title holder at all. Maybe just maybe, if we can live in faith, that this wasn't about that. Maybe it's about, like, who you needed to become to actually get there.
Dude, and I really, this is so about you, and thank you for volunteering her to be on this. But as a man, how did you, as we wrap this portion up, and then you're going to come back and we'll get deeper on those things that men need to hear. But as a man in that journey, what was your biggest lesson, being on the other side of that, as a father, as a husband, as a partner, as a person that's building businesses?
Well, I think it's hard because she, when you watch your wife and somebody that you love so much go through these challenges and push and spend a lot of money, and then still get hurt in the process, right? Like, and then, like, feel like it's not as rewarding as you thought it would be, or whatever, and that happens, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make it sound like it was all bad, but, like, there were plenty of, like, bright spots and good elements and relationships built and whatnot, but it was different than she thought it would be, right?
Different,
like, and so,
different.
Yep. And so, like,
what do you learn?
Seeing that experience and seeing her struggle and seeing her internal challenges, all while, like, she's taking things and stepping aside from her business and not growing in other areas, and questioning herself and spending money and doing all these things, as a man, as a husband, who's, like, seeing that happen, it's hard. But, like, what I just tried to do is just step aside and love her and support her, And the hardest part for me was to not try to fix her problems and solve her problems and give her the answers. And because, she's a big girl, and it just came down to, I know she's on this path. She's, and I just had to like check in with her regularly about like, how are things going? It's just a lot of questions about, how can I serve you? Not going in with an opinion, not going in with hey, I can't believe this just happened, or they should be treating you like this, or this should be like, I know you thought it would be like this, and blah, 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 blah. Here's all the things. Let me advocate for you and go fight for you, because believe me, there's a big part of me that wanted to do that and could do that. But you got to take a step back and just like, just be there to support and love, and not try to solve all the problems. And I think that's one of the challenges I think that husbands specifically have. If we want to help and we want to protect and we want to, that shows up in a lot of different ways. And also balance, like protecting the family, right? Because like there is an element, with what she was doing. And if she goes on your podcast, I'll let you ask her, but like, cause she'll give a more articulate answer on this, but that I could probably position it where it's like, all right, she was probably sabotaging the family in a way with some of the decisions she was making on this. But as a husband, I can't call her out on that. You know what I mean? Like, I just got to love, and we got to set boundaries. We got to have real conversations, but like, it's about her journey. And now looking back at it, it's awesome now. Like, it sucked in the moment, right? Like, it was really, there were some hard conversations and hard moments of restraint for me, like from that perspective. But now looking back, she's got full clarity on it, and she's a different person, and she's a better person, and she's got better experience. And I'm just grateful for that.
And so are you.
Total 100%.
Which would I'm keep driving at
in our relationship. And
yes. Here's interesting. My wife, very strong personality. She's been on this show. She will not listen to the podcast I did with her. She listened to every one of them, but not that one. But she's got this incredible heart where she deals mainly with men, very, very wealthy men. And through her heart, she doesn't try to compete with them as another man. She competes with them as a woman of God who has a great heart, who is about love, who is about servitude, who is not about fluff, but she's about strength. She's about focus. I mean, she's just this incredible human. I cannot fix, not that there's anything to fix there, but obviously 70-hour weeks, when she drops, she needs to relax, right? All she requires of me, this is a different story, but all she requires of me is to be there for her and to be nice to her and to love her, because I can't fix her. I'm not qualified to fix her. Not that there's any fixing that needs to go on, but look, my wife and I came on, we started Celebrate Recovery together. Now she did it because she wanted to support me, but in that she got a sponsor. She started looking at some things, right? And if and when she does her testimony, she'll tell you different doors were open because God put it on my heart to do Celebrate Recovery. And her being this incredible soul that wanted to support her husband, maybe it wasn't just done for me, right? So maybe this wasn't just done for her. Maybe it was also done for you, but we're not supposed to fix. And that's what most men think. I've got to fix it. Right. Yep. So, but thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry I went too deep and tell you.
Oh, no, you're good, man. I said, life's an open book for us. So like, and we didn't even get into it. And I know we're up on time, but like, we went through in 08 and 09, actually 09, we went through a separation. We ended up saving our marriage. She got sober, there was a whole thing. And we just, when we made it through an 8-month separation and rekindling and deciding to start a family and recommitting to each other. And when we got through stuff that most people wouldn't get through, we just committed to each other that like our life's an open book. And if our story can help people, then it's our responsibility. Like God gave us the experience to share it with people, to serve and help other people. And, that's, I always tell people like my real, like I make my living, helping people with money and coaching people with money, but my real passion is helping men show up to be better husbands and helping, families stick together and like, that's really, cause that's the important stuff, at the end of money's a part of it,
Can't do it with, I mean, we can do it without it, but it's certainly a lot easier to do it with it. Right.
For sure.
Right.
For sure. Yep.
So there's so much I want to talk to you about. I want you to hit a couple of minutes, and I'm glad this is long on what Life 180 is about. And also, of course, as you wrap that up, tell us a little bit about how do we get a hold of you. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing who gets the first Dell Award. But tell us a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, man. I'm definitely going to look into that. So, Life 180. It's funny because I'm writing my second financial book right now, and it's coming out hopefully at the end of January. It's called Cashflow Hacking. It's all about investing for cash flow, and I do a lot of different kind of angles in the book. But I'm a big believer. One of the things that drives me is and I always talk about the 4 F's of life, right? We got our faith, our family, our fitness, which is just health, but I wanted to F, right? So fitness and finances, right? And so it's interesting, right? Because like, if you think about it, like with your faith, you can't outsource your success with your faith, right? Like your pastor, like I love Bart, but Bart can't he could pray for me plenty, and hopefully he does, right? Like, but he can't read the Bible for me. He can't really get in and do my conversations and increase my relationship with God, right? Like I got to do that work. And with our family, I got to show up and be the best husband I can be. I got to do the work that it takes to be a husband, to be a father. Like I can't outsource what it is, like the success of being a good husband and a father and a family man. Like I just can't do it. With my fitness, I can't outsource my success with my fitness and my health. I got to eat healthy. I got to exercise. And if I don't do it, the results are going to show, right? Like nobody else, my personal trainer is not going to be able to do my reps for me, kind of deal. Like I got to do it. So we know that in those 3 areas, which I if I were to go around and ask most people, like, what are the most important things in your life? Faith, family, health, and money are going to be in there in some way, shape, or form, right? That's kind of what I've noticed. And so this is what I'm writing about in the book is like, when you realize this, and you realize I can't outsource these areas, but somehow with our finances, we've been kind of talked and tricked into believing that we can outsource our success with our money. We could just make our money. It's my job as an entrepreneur to make the money, to give it to some money manager, and it's their responsibility to get us where we want to go. And so, what I've kind of been on, and there's no judgment behind this, but like I always kind of tell people, you are where you are in life because of who you are in life. And while money is not the most important thing, what I can promise you is that money is kind of a foundational component. Whilst, faith is definitely, I put them in that order for a reason, the faith, family, fitness, and finances. But how you handle your money will have a direct impact. Who you become with your money will have a direct impact on how you show up in those other areas of your life. And I am just super passionate. What Life 180 is all about is getting people to be, it's funny because we're a financial company, but we're really not. We're really like a people company that wants to build people, that utilizes building you with your relationship with money to help you improve in these other areas of life. And what I believe is if you align your money with your values and beliefs, the whole thing changes. Your whole life changes. And that's what I'm passionate about. And that's what Life 180 is all about. And, I've got over 100 money coaches now that work for me, with me across the country. And we're growing, and, I love it. And, I'm just really passionate about it. And I think, right now with the world, the way the world is, it's more important now than it's been in a long time.
Yeah. Good. That's so exciting with you. You're such a driver, and you're driven in every area. It's not just like you said, you got to, it's not a spectator sport, man. we got to put on the breastplate, the helmet, get the sword, and pick up the mat and walk. To use a couple analogies, and you're an example of it, bro. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for authenticity. Thank you for those who have listened, because we know there's so many nuggets here. How do they get a hold of Chris?
Well, you can always check me out on YouTube. And if you don't mind, I'd love to put this on my YouTube channel and share it for other people as well, because I think that, get you some exposure as well and whatnot. But you can find me Life 180 on YouTube. You can always go to life180.com, LIFE180.com. Life 180, just so everybody knows, is an acronym, living intentionally for excellence. And the 180 is about turning the results in your life around. That's kind of like what inspired the name. And then Chris, if you want to email me directly, it's just Chris, CHRIS at life180.com.
Perfect. You know, it's interesting too, and you really inspired me to say this with your wife's story and the ups and downs of life. What I get to do, like you, is help people get from where they are to that place of peace that is their max capacity. And that's what it's just what it's all about. How do we help people get from here to there? Specifically in my world, it's men that I try to do that with. And you know, my sobriety has helped me be a great coach with that. And I'm honored to be able to do that with people. So if anybody's listening to this and you want to talk about life's hurts, habits, and hangups, hit up my brother Chris, or feel free to call me, and let's you and I hang out for a bit like we are here, except not on camera or video. And we can talk and we can figure out how do we get on that life path that's God's greater good. So thank you, my brother. God bless you. Fantastic job. And we'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, brother.
Kiss your family.
Appreciate you.
Take care.
Buddy.